athlete or not? Pete Fiutak, the guy that, shame on the guy. We're going to feature him coming up in 30 seconds. He literally has written about that he doesn't care if they're an NFF, National Football Foundation scholar athlete. He said he doesn't care. College Football Hall of Fame and ballot is out, and that's one of the credentials that you lay out as a scholar guy. Like, would that encourage you to vote for it? According to Pete Fiutak, it's his second criteria. He said, I know I'm supposed to care if a player was an NFF scholar athlete, but I don't. Pete Fiutak, are you kidding, man? You don't really care if they make good grades?
I didn't make good grades. Why should I make the football players get good grades?
Okay.
I stunk. My kid's in finals right now, and I'm a bad role model because, all right, so what did I do in ninth grade algebra? I don't know. I think D plus-ish or something. I don't know. I was good at school, just not good at everything. So why should I be hypocritical and say that these guys that I care that if they're good football players, that if I care, they should be able to be good at other stuff that they don't care about. They don't want to be students. They want to play football.
I'm with you. I hear you. I also like your number 3, though. Win a Heisman, get in the Hall of Fame. Shouldn't that be automatic? Should it not be?
It kind of, yeah. It's kind of. We can all debate whether or not a Gino Torretta was deserving, and certainly, the Eric Crouches of the world. It's hard to think like Jadarius, but yeah, if that means you are the best player of supposedly in that season, at least that's what the media or these voters like me thought at the time. So yeah, if you win a Heisman Trophy, you are one of the greatest college football players of all time, and you should just go to the Hall of Fame. Now, one of the things I don't like about the College Football Hall of Fame criteria is it's a pretty harsh criteria. You have to be recognized as an All-American, national All-American by one of these outlets, which means it kind of limits some guys. Like, there's no Joe Montana is not going to be eligible ever for the College Football Hall of Fame, according to this. And forgetting what he did in the pros, he was a pretty legendary college quarterback between the chicken soup game win over Houston and the Cotton Bowl. He won a national championship for the Irish. So there's certain parts of this I don't necessarily like. But overall, okay, it's College Football Hall of Fame is kind of a weird thing anyway, but it's fun to vote for.
All right, but I think it is good recognition. You mentioned Joe Montana. If I told you Joe Namath was not in the Hall of Fame, would you believe me?
Was not in the Hall of Fame?
He is not in the Hall of Fame.
Okay, I'm embarrassed to say I'm guessing he did win a national title because Alabama just basically claimed like 19 national titles that
claim
wouldn't have.
No, whoa, Pete, not claim one, baby.
I will go. I can point out. We just did the article about the 150 greatest national champions in 150 years of college football. Now, of course, there are split national champions, but according to the various outlets, and remembering that these are before, a lot of them were named before the bowl time. There's a bunch of iffy Alabama national champions on there. So, but yeah, I guess I'm guessing
Joe was not. He was not an All-American. He's not eligible.
All right, I guess not. Was he that? I know he was good because of course the NFL and AFL wanted him, but forgetting his stats were at a different time. I'm guessing he was great. I can honestly not speak to how great Joe Namath was as a college quarterback. I haven't, I guess, looked him up enough. I know like other great Alabama quarterbacks were, but where does Namath rank compared to a Stabler or Richard Todd or guys like that back in the day?
Well, in 65, he was the first overall pick in the AFL, so that tells you what type of quality.
Well, he's talented, but look, Johnny Unitas is considered one of the great. Johnny Unitas was a mediocre college quarterback. Like he's one of the great NFL names of all time, but he was just sort of a guy at Louisville. So it's some of these. It doesn't always change. Fred Biletnikoff was a very good college player. I don't know if he's the be-all end-all wide receiver, but so sometimes these guys just take on legendary status because of what they did after college.
Well, okay, let's go back, and this is what really punishes Alabama. We're trying to get E.J. Jr. in from the 70s. He's still on the ballot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was a historic player. But see, what happened was Derek Thomas is what created the backlog.
Yeah.
Because it took a lot of years to get him in, and not only were you punishing Derek Thomas, you punished the 5 years that you could put other players on the ballot.
What's really weird about the College Football Hall of Fame, voting for this, and I dive into the historical stuff as much as anybody. But you get all the I don't know how certain guys, who played for example, Oregon State in 1950, all of a sudden become legendary players now. Like, there's no way that people are voting for some of these old-time guys over, say, a James Laurinaitis or, an E.J. Jr. And so sometimes the problem is you get kind of a weird mix of old school guys who, like, really, this guy was just, he ran for 300 yards a season and he's in the Hall of Fame, compared to some of these great statistical guys of the moment. So you're talking different eras, different guys. But yeah, it kind of stinks when you have some players who are just these legendary guys, maybe like a Joe Namath, who don't have the stats, because you can't possibly compare a Joe Namath, for example, to a Kyler Murray statistical-wise.
Well, and maybe I sat down a couple of years ago and actually talked with the National Football Foundation guy, and I said, you really got to look at adjusting some criteria, because, see, they also have another criteria. If a school puts a player in, he could not put consecutive players in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that doesn't work for me either. I don't like that. And they get a little too, I want to say hypocritical, but if you're going to start punishing guys, at least in theory, for alleged things and or possibly have gotten in trouble and putting teams on probation and things, if you really stared hard, you probably wouldn't have a College Football Hall of Fame if you took out guys who allegedly took things, from boosters or had other sorts of issues. So I tend to, we joke about, yes, I kind of don't care about what they did as a scholar athlete. I really care about what they did on the field, at least in terms of going into the Hall of Fame. But on this other stuff too, it really has to come down to what did you do on the field? Now, I'm totally hypocritical on this because I have no problem with the Barry Bonds of the world not getting in the Baseball Hall of Fame. But for me, it's really, who are the legendary figures of college football? And it's also sort of got to be, look, you're either in or you're out. Are you if we have to argue the point, you're probably not a legendary enough figure to go into a Hall of Fame.
All right, Pete, in the SEC, we've just got back from Sandestin a couple of hours ago. We're back in Tuscaloosa. We spent a week down there. SEC football coaches. Which SEC football coach is on the hottest seat and have made their last appearance to Sandestin at the SEC spring meetings?
Well, part of the issue is, who are the guys who you can kind of look at the hot seat a couple different ways. Like, I kind of always classify the hot seat as who really sort of needs to win just to make sure that their lives aren't miserable, because some of these guys aren't going to get fired, but you don't want to lose a big, like, for example, in the Big Ten world, like Jim Harbaugh is on a hot seat. He's never going to get fired, but he's got a lot of pressure on him. Now, in terms of you need to win or get fired, you know how this rolls. I mean, guys who right now seem like they're superstars and are locks to be there for the next several years, you go 6-6 if you're Ed Orgeron this year. You go 6-6 if you're Gus Malzahn. And all of a sudden, that's kind of a hard job to keep if you already put on several hot seat lists in the past, and then maybe you're a couple bad games away from the program wanting to make a change. To me, I think I like what Auburn's going to do this year, so I sort of don't think that Malzahn's going to necessarily be on it. But is 8 wins going to be good enough if you're Auburn? To me, the guy who's probably on the hottest seat in terms of win or else has got to be Will Muschamp, because Tennessee's on the rise under Jeremy Pruitt, at least to be better. Georgia's still the star of the SEC East, and Florida's looking nasty. Looks like it's possibly a top 10 caliber team coming into the season under Dan Mullen. If you're Will Muschamp and you've got to deal with Georgia and Florida, and you got to play Clemson, and you've got such a nasty schedule, if after so many years there, is 7-5 good enough? I don't know.
All right, Pete, as you look around the SEC, or we'll go after college football after this, but is there somebody in the league that you think is setting themselves up for disappointment? Like, everybody's buying this Texas A&M hype. Everybody's buying Florida hype. Tennessee, obviously, those guys win the offseason every single offseason. I mean, it's Tennessee. I mean, it gets old down here in the South. They're only undefeated in May and June and July. When August gets here, they're back to their losing ways. Is there anybody in the SEC that you're saying, I'm just not going to buy this team?
I almost want to say Florida to a certain extent,
Sure.
only because they really are that good. And the difference, there's a difference in expectations now. I think the expectation, I have not read, heard, or talked to anybody yet who doesn't seem to have the exact right expectations for Texas A&M, where, yeah, they could absolutely beat anybody on their schedule. You know, it's not a shock if we're talking, you know, several months from now and they pulled off a win over an Alabama or a Clemson or anybody. They're not going to beat both of them. They're not going to run the table. Their schedule is just way, way too nasty. But I think the expectations for the Aggies are pretty much right on, because that's one of probably the 15 best teams in the country, but their schedule is just too brutal. But Florida, if your expectations now are, okay, look what you did last year, all right, now go to the college football playoff or at least win the SEC, that's a little bit too much of a push. Now, they could absolutely beat Georgia. They could absolutely go to the SEC championship game. But can they be that much better than a 10-win team, considering what they've got to deal with this schedule? That's probably a little outsized expectations for them, at least going into the season.
All right, Pete, outside of the SEC, who out there that you're looking at and you're going, I'm just not going to buy stock in this team. I hear a lot of the hype. I mean, who out there that you would maybe college football news, June overrated teams? Who are they?
Oregon. Oregon's going to be the one that everyone's going to fall in love with right out of the gate because they get everybody back. All the 10 of the 11 stars are back. They're missing Dylan Mitchell, their top receiver, but they replaced them with Juwan Johnson, transfer from Penn State. The defense is fantastic. They recruited their tails off, so they've got one of the better recruiting classes in the country with a whole lot of instant starter guys who can come in and play a big role. I'll buy it when I see it. I still like to think Washington's still probably the class of the Pac-12 North. The Pac-12 overall is going to be a whole lot better. Stanford's going to be pretty strong. Cal's got a kind of a nasty defense up there in the North. Washington State's always dangerous. So there's just enough and plus Oregon's got to play. Forgive me if I'm really wrong about this. I can't believe if I whiff this, but I think they get Auburn to start the season.
They do.
Give me the last time other than maybe when Texas A&M gagged against UCLA, or maybe a random USC game against Notre Dame. The last time the Pac-12 came up with a really good non-conference win. I'll still buy the SEC and Auburn in that. So everyone's going to have Oregon in their top 10, maybe even top 5 for some, and I'm just not quite buying into them. And on a bigger, larger, huge scale, we're talking here early June, and I'm willing to change this. I'm not quite buying that Clemson's going to be this be-all, end-all. There's just something, maybe I've waited for this the last couple of years and have been horribly wrong. I just kind of see that they could lose to a Texas A&M. They could have an off day like they do like against Syracuse over the last couple of years. I know they didn't misfire last year. They came close to losing to Syracuse, and they went on an absolute tear after that. But if they lose Trevor Lawrence for any stretch of time, when you have so much of a turnover off that great defensive front, there's a lot of young talent there. But again, you guys know this better than anybody else in Alabama. The difference between going undefeated and having 2 losses, that's it. That's you lose one extra game that you shouldn't, and that's your season. And so, in terms of expectations, I'm not ready to just assume that Clemson's going to be this automatic in the college football playoff again.
Are you serious?
Look at how they're good, but again, you're asking. We've talked about this many times when it comes to Alabama, where how can you expect a team to go undefeated? How do you demand? It's been the greatness under Nick Saban. Year in and year out, how do you expect? How these expectations that say you have to be 11-1, and if you're Clemson or anybody, or Ohio State, or even Alabama, it's just the expectations are always outsized to say you've got to be this team that's going to go undefeated or go 11-1. Again, if you're one quarterback injury away, you're one bad off day, you're one great Texas A&M performance, or one weird day against a better Florida State or someone else on this ACC schedule, it's just not that bad, away from just not being back to that highest of high levels that they've been at.
Pete, I know what you're doing. I know exactly what you're doing. You criticized Alabama for having too many national titles as we started the conversation. Now you're trying to suck up to them by criticizing Clemson. I'm not falling for it, Pete.
Either or. It's not an either or. Well, first of all, in the national championship, if you're Alabama, if you're going to claim at least half of those national championships, then you've got to give UCF their national championship from a couple of years ago.
No, come on. We're not in that category, Pete. Come on.
You were for a couple of those times. There's a couple of big bowl games your old program lost and still claimed a national championship in there. So,
yeah, but that was prior. That was when they awarded the national championship prior to the bowl game.
But now that we're looking back on this and being able to readjust then.
So are you telling me we should go back and take them away?
Sure. If we're able to do this, if we're able to judge, if it's all on judging, and that's the positive about and it's going to the UCF argument, why I'm sort of in the anti-UCF thing, is that we know that Alabama won the college football playoff. There is an actual tournament now. That yes, okay. So
you're saying that we should have championships as of 5 years ago, and that's it?
Well, you can still have championships, but you can at least determine them based on the criteria that now in a modern day lens, we can go back and say, yeah, you know what? There are some times when a team was named a national champion by an outlet that went on to lose to a team that ended up being better in a bowl game. So, yeah, we can kind of look back on this from a historical sense, and that's kind of what we did in the piece, is that it kind of comes on through that says, yeah, there's some of these historical teams that, okay, they were named a national champion, but didn't quite get it done in the bowl games prior to 1970 when, like you said, the bowl games didn't necessarily matter in the national championship mix.
Pete, I had another plan for the show. I think you just derailed it.
What did I do?
You criticized Alabama's national titles, man.
I'm not criticizing it. I'm pointing out a fact that, simply put, that a lot of these national titles were handed out before the bowl games. And that's
the next time we discuss, I think there's more that Alabama should claim.
You know what? That's a real interesting call. I'm sure there are a couple on there that at least that they would have been in the mix for. But yeah, there's a couple over the history. It's not just Alabama either, by the way. If you look back at there's an Arkansas one in there that's a little bit iffy. There's a lot of Yale and Penn national champions in there when they played a bunch of high school teams along the way. That's what we did with the piece. The whole point of the piece that we did was really bust down the schedules and say, okay, who actually, because again, most of the national champions were based on guesses. Because even as little as 10 years ago, you got a lot of guys who you're basing these off of the AP or the coaches polls, and none of those guys watched every game. You're trying to come up with a 1950s national champion when you had maybe one game on a TV at some point and somebody saw. So you're going on rumors. You're going on a whole lot of really weird criteria for a lot of these national champions. And so we kind of try to bust through that a little bit.
Pete Fiutak, collegefootballnews.com, collegefootballnews.com, collegefootballnews.com. If you're looking for that appetizer to get to the real steak that begins in late August, you go there, you get the great appetizer, and throughout the season they provide the steak too. It's collegefootballnews.com. Pete, have a wonderful afternoon and a great week. Thank you, man.
Later, Ryan.
Absolutely. Pete Fiutak, College Football